Welcome to the Dad Show Podcast, a show all about impacting, empowering, inspiring, and uplifting information to become a better dad, husband, man, and mentor. And now, your host, Ryan Ladd.
Welcome to the Dad Show Podcast. How y'all doing?
Welcome back to the Dad Show, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank y'all for joining us. I've got Mr. Matt Hill in the studio today. Matt's grown close to us over the past year or so, especially with the foundation. He's a board member on the Kennedy Ladd Foundation. He manages and has built, him and his wife as a team together, has built our website and has continued with marketing and everything else that you can imagine working behind the scenes for the foundation. So everything that you're going to see on the web and computer, phone, you name it, Matt's had a hand in it, I promise. And he's been a blessing to us to continue to help that and grow that. And just working really, really hard, him and his wife. I know we've had some conversations at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night.
Later than that.
And
sure.
We're going to hear how he manages all that throughout this podcast today. But, Matt, I want to thank you for being here and greatly appreciate you being on.
Yeah, appreciate the invite.
Yes, sir.
I'm excited.
So if you don't mind, take just a minute and let everybody know who you are, who they're listening to, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Matthew Hill. Grew up in Rockwood, graduated from Rockwood High School 2008, and tried out college at different colleges, fumbled through college, ended up out at Tennessee Tech where I met my wife. And so I've known Kaylee. She's from Kingston. My wife, Kaylee Hill, she's a Kingstonian. We met out at Tech. We were best friends for like 3 or 4 years. And then
didn't date during that time? Or
we
just
did not date. If you want to know more about that story, I can tell you. But
we're going to hear it.
I tried to date her. It was not. This was not on me. This was on her. But we were like best friends for 3 or 4 years, and then everyone left and got jobs and left Cookeville, and she was left with just me. And so I convinced her and tricked her into dating me. But yeah, so we got married. 2015. We had Kimber, my daughter. She's 9 and goes to KES. My son Briggs, he's 6 and goes to Legacy Christian Academy. My wife is the deputy county executive for Wade Cresswell, the county executive, and I work full time out at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. And then we own a little business called Hillco and Brand. Again, we can be a little bit about the story today, but it was formerly K2 Alliance Group, and we ran that out of Cookeville and the Nashville market. So we moved back to Roane County, and we said that we would never own a business again. And some people found out about what we did, and one thing led to another. And we actually ended up working with Wade on some stuff before he was in office, and the word really kind of started to get out then. And then at the end of the first year, we had a little over 50 clients.
Wow.
And I think we're probably closer to 100 this year.
So this was K2 Alliance in Cookeville, correct? And then you kind of just shut down operations from that point and said, we're not doing this again.
Yeah.
What brought you back to Roane County?
Yeah, so that's right. It was K2 Alliance Group was the name. Right out of college. I never really wanted to go to college.
Me either. I didn't.
Yeah, and my mom, she taught college. She kind of basically was like, "You're going," and so I'll never forget. I tell people all the time when I went to Tech, I actually asked the advisors like, "What's the quickest way out of here?" The quickest and easiest way out of here, man. She said journalism or communications, and so I actually majored in journalism with a focus in public relations and news editorial. I never really thought I'd do anything with. My first job out of college was Enterprise Rent-A-Car, which was a terrible job. I hated it. In fact, I quit on my lunch break. Kaylee and I were engaged at this time.
Wow.
And I met her for lunch, and I was like, hey, I just quit on my way over here. She was pregnant, and she was just like, okay. So that was a shock. But from there, I ended up getting into radio. And I sold advertisements for a local radio station. And that's where I started to learn marketing. And but at the time, this was 2015, and digital was really starting to peak, like social media. People were kind of figuring out for the first time, like what influencer marketing and social media marketing and like what the landscape of that was going to look like. And so it was like very difficult to go out and just beat down doors and sell radio advertising because people are like, no one listens to radio anymore.
Yeah,
Pandora had just, popped off over, several years
Sirius was
prior
coming
to
up with that big time too, right?
XM radio had changed a lot of things prior to that. You had Spotify coming to the scene. Like the landscape of traditional media was being overhauled essentially. And so I talked to my sales manager at the radio station one day, and I'm like, hey, first off, are there people out there? I think we totally blitzed the
you're
question,
good. Go ahead.
Just kind of telling you how we ended up here.
I chase rabbit holes all the time.
Okay, it's a long story, so just cut me off at any point. But
no, you're good.
I went to my sales manager who had become a pretty good friend of mine. His name was Rami, similar in age and very interested in the same things. He found a lot of success in the radio market very early in his career. And he was the sales manager there at the radio station in Cookeville. And I just had this like thought one day of, we're going into these businesses and we're obviously trying to sell radio. And that was really the only product that we had,
Yeah.
And oftentimes these business owners, like they might buy from you. They've got a marketing budget. Some are big, some are small. But you're just competing against everybody. I mean, people are out trying to sell TV. They're trying to sell billboards. And again, at this point, digital had been a big thing. So we were constantly getting beat out by these social media companies and things like that.
And it was a lot cheaper too as well.
It was cheap. It was cheaper, but the biggest thing is that it was measurable.
Yeah.
When you talk about radio and stuff like that, I mean, you have reports on the listener counts and things like that, but it's very vague. With digital, it's like with precision almost, right?
Oh, yeah.
So there was a big selling point, but nonetheless, I'm like, does anybody like do this independently and like basically go and establish relationships with these digital vendors or TVs companies, Comcast or radio, and just go into the business and be like, hey, I'm a marketing guru. Like I can sell you anything, right? And then just work out contract negotiations with these vendors. And he was like, yeah, your like McDonald's accounts and stuff like that, and the companies that call you up and buy for them, they're media buying agencies.
Yeah.
So essentially that's exactly what they do, is they take these large conglomerates and they take all the money and they break it up and they put together a marketing mix that works, in their market or in markets across the world for national brands like McDonald's and stuff. And I'm like, well, okay, great. That makes sense. Duh. But does anybody do it like at a local level, And he was like, they do. People have kind of tried in this market in Cookeville, but no one's ever, really succeeded. And so I'm like, well, let's do it. Like, naturally. And
just quit Enterprise.
I was like, let's just quit. I just quit one job. Like, I'm 6 months, probably 8 months into this radio gig. And he just kind of laughs and puts it off. And so we can talk more in depth about kind of where things went from there. But that's really how K2 started. I finally convinced him to break away. And because of the relationships that we had, we ended up going to, at the time, we had 2 pretty large clients that committed to doing this. And we pre-sold it before we ever left the company.
So you'd already got clients started
We'd
before
already gotten
you
a
ever.
client. One of them was a decent spender at the radio station, but we knew that they had a large budget.
Yeah.
It was a local car dealership called Cumberland Automotive, and we had discussed, and they had committed to, if you go out and break away, it'd be something we'd be interested in talking about. They didn't lock in because legally, we couldn't do anything, but we just mentioned kind of the idea, and he was interested. And then we'd actually spoken to Cookeville Regional Medical Center, which was another one.
Wow.
And so I'm like, look, there's interest there,
Yeah.
So I finally convinced him.
It gave you the spark by.
Gave this spark, yeah.
Yeah.
Him and I ended up leaving the radio station. Cumberland Kia did end up signing. That was our first big client. But Cookeville Regional ended up falling through. And so really about a month or two of Rami and I trying to, have this company take flight. And he's like, man, I at the time he was making significantly more than I was making. I mean, Kaylee and I had nothing and needed nothing.
Yeah.
I remember, I think our bills all in at the time were like maybe not even $1,000. So
Wow.
it was easy to.
And y'all will learn that Kaylee's got to keep Matt in check. Like
Yeah.
Kaylee she's the penny pincher.
She is.
In the
she hates
marriage.
spending money, and I love it. So,
But you'll learn that in a little bit. But
yeah.
go ahead. Sorry.
So So we didn't need much. And so this was it was easy for me to just quit. And Kaylee, she worked a full-time job. She was a case manager at like a local mental health organization that worked with kids and stuff like that. So she had a stable job. We had an income there. And I was just over here, playing ball in right field. But
so
anyway,
how old were you at this time?
I was 25.
25.
Yeah, 25. Okay. And we broke away. It didn't work out. So Rami was like, hey, I got to go back to work. So he actually went back to where he started in radio, which was iHeartMedia in Nashville. And he ended up being the sales manager again there. And so I told him, I'm like, hey, dude, give me a year and I'll grow this thing and I'll get you back.
Yeah.
And he's like, great, sounds awesome. Yeah. And I think during that time, he kind of didn't really believe that it would happen.
Yeah.
So here I am. I'd quit my job. Kaylee and I at this point, we're engaged. We had moved in together. We were living in a duplex in Cookeville. And I was driving one day behind a car that had a sticker that said Down and Dirty Cleaning Service on it. And I had seen several of those vehicles around town. So I'm like, hey, I'm going to get on Google and look it up, right? See what this business is. I was literally going door to door again, trying to sell, at this point, almost anything I could. And I really was focusing on like, hey, give me a budget and I'll break it up and I'll work with these vendors, the kind of same concept. And then I'll rake a percentage off the top and find and get an agency commission, which is very standard for the industry.
Which is very beneficial to small businesses.
Very business to small business because, one, they don't know marketing.
Yeah.
And they have these people calling on them all the time to spend money.
Exactly.
And they're just kind of shooting in the wind and hoping for the best. And it never really works out.
Yeah.
So it's like, hey, I'll be the buffer between you and them. Anybody that comes in the door, you give them my business card, tell them, call your agent, call your agency, whatever it might be. Yeah. And then I'll work with them.
Yeah. And it's a whole lot easier for you to say no.
Correct.
Than it is for me to tell my buddy no.
Now they're not the bad person, what have you.
Exactly.
It gets them out of their hair and it allows them to leverage somebody that they trust and that, has their best interest in mind. Like you give me a dollar amount and I'll look at all the vendors and all the placement and I'll put together a marketing mix, obviously with your approval.
Yeah.
And then we'll buy. And then the idea was that as my business grows, as my buying power grows, I'll start to have leverage. And so actually the more clients that would join the alliance, the more money we would be purchased or the more money we would have to purchase power every month. And so we could call up these radio stations, these TV companies and things and say, we want, this slot,
yeah,
this much frequency or whatever it might look like. And we want it at this dollar amount.
And because you were bringing such a big clientele, you were able to get the discounts.
Correct. I'm like, you have people out all day, every day, beating down doors, trying to get this phone call. And I'm telling you, I've got money right now. I've got checks right now with no one's name on them. And I'm hoping to write them today, but I need you to give me what,
I'm asking
what
for.
we're asking for.
Yeah.
So we can get into that a little bit more later because as that buying power really ramped up, it quite literally got to the point where we were calling up these old radio stations that we worked for and saying, hey, I've got a $100,000 check this month to spend on radio amongst these 5-10 clients, whatever it might be. I'm putting somebody's name on it today. It's either yours or it's your competitor down the road. Like, I don't really care.
Yeah.
And so we would just get whatever. And so as that word got out and people were like, oh, we really can stretch our dollar. We had more and more people, start joining. But anyway, back to Down and Dirty. I'm sitting there. This was early on in the business. And I looked it up on Google and nothing came up. And so for weeks, I'm like, had this realization of like, there's potential here to just sell websites. Like if people aren't on Google, what do you have to be on Google? Well, at the time, Facebook wasn't really ranking the way it does today. It was, but not quite as much.
Yeah.
So it's like, you need a website. One day there's this coffee shop in Cookeville called Poets. And I went there and it was early in the morning. I used to go there and work because I didn't have an office and I would just go out and I would stop there in the morning and I would kind of gather myself and where I was going to go for the day. And it was probably 7, 8 in the morning. And I saw a line of those cars, the Down and Dirty cleaning cars. And so I'm like, well, clearly that's their office, right? So I walk in there and there's this young lady. Her name's Jennifer. I met her and I basically pitched her on a website. I had no idea how to build a website. But I'm thinking I can find a vendor that will, or how hard really can building a website be? And she bought it. $900. That was the first website I ever sold. It's like $900. I had no idea. So being the, I guess, millennial, I don't know exactly what I am, but that I went on YouTube. like how to build a website.
Oh, yeah.
And I found this video, how to build a website, step by step, no steps skipped. And I literally just started, and I would watch 15, 20 seconds, and I would stop, and I would do exactly what it said to do. It was by a YouTube channel by name. The guy goes by the name of Tyler. I don't know that that's his real name, but if you type in Tyler and WordPress and website, you'll find it. And I just watched religiously his videos. And to this day, that client is still with me.
Wow.
And to this day, it's one of my highest trafficked websites. It's also one of my worst, but for some reason, it took off and it really enhanced her business and really got her a lot of business. And from there got us a lot more clients. And so that was kind of the start of like web development. Since then, it's become a whole career of mine. But yeah, that was really where it started. And so I would go door to door and just kind of rinse, wash, and repeat. I would go into these shopping centers. I would look at businesses. I would Google, for instance, if I went into a shopping center and there was a nail salon or something like that, nail salons, Cookeville, if they didn't pop up, I would just go in and I'd be like, hey, I was here. I searched for nail salons. You didn't pop up. How much would you pay me to get you to pop up?
Yeah.
Right? And so we started building sort of a base that way with the web clients. And then after a year, right at a year, I called up Rami. And I'd landed a couple media buying contracts, and I'm like, "Hey, man, I need help. Like, we're growing." During that time, I'd hired an assistant. We got pretty busy. Hired a girl from Rockwood, and she was working for me, and we grew. And I called up Rami one day, and he met with me, and I kind of showed him the contracts that I'd just landed, and he was like, "I'm all in." So actually, Kaylee and I went to his house in Mount Juliet and met with him and his wife, and he was like, "I'm all in." And so from there, K2 really began. That was the end of 2015. It took, or right at the beginning of 2016. And so it really took off. Now, getting back to your original question, how did we end up back here? That started sort of a very intense ride, if you will.
Were you married at this time?
I was married. So I'm married at this point.
We'd had
Kimber.
Yep.
Kaylee was still, working her job, but we were really finding success for the first time. It was shortly after that that Kaylee actually ended up not working anymore. I don't recall exactly when, but I believe it was around the time that Kimber was ready to get into daycare, and Kaylee really didn't want to go back to work. And again, we were still at the time we had purchased a house. This was back obviously before the market got crazy, and I'll never forget. We actually were paying less for our mortgage than we were paying for rent. It was like a brand new house.
Wow.
Out in Sparta, which is right next to Cookeville.
Yeah.
And so we were living there and things were good. The business was growing like crazy for the first time. It's like, this is stable. Like, this is no longer a concept. Like, we're full on doing this. I brought my business partner back. We had an assistant. We had an office. We actually had purchased a company vehicle that we were using for work because we were driving, nonstop. We were on the road. And so it came time for Kaylee to go back to work. And it was like, hey, financially right now, you don't have to do that if you don't want to. And she didn't. So she stayed at home. But over the next 2 years, the company just absolutely exploded. There were big time contracts going, businesses and dealerships out in the Nashville area and what have you. So there is an interesting piece where it really exploded. We stumbled upon this kind of idea, if you will. In automotive, local automotive, there's a program called Co-op. And what it is like, so corporate Ford, for instance, they run this algorithm, they do this math, and they end up deeming every vehicle that's sold is worth so much money in that market to market that product.
I got you.
And so as long as you hit your quota every month that the corporate office gives you, say it's 50 new cars.
Yeah.
Then you're allotted so much money per each one of those vehicles to market that vehicle, or like a reimbursement, or in this case, to market it in the next month, right? You're allotted this money. But in that program, the guidelines for that are like extremely strenuous. So much so to like print ads and stuff, have to have so much spacing between these elements, and, you have to get everything pre-approved. So like if you're running radio or TV and you cut a commercial, It has to say and be a certain amount of time. It has to say certain things, especially with dealer incentives that month and stuff like that. So you're getting all this information and guideline. You have to have it all pre-approved by corporate. It has to run. Then you have to have it all notarized, submit all your copy and stuff that ran, right? There's just a big process and
a lot of red tape.
A lot of red tape.
Yep.
And none of the dealerships were using it. So we were running into dealerships that would have $3, $4, $5, $1 million just sitting in a fund for marketing that they weren't using.
Yeah.
And the reason being is that none of those local dealerships have a marketing person, right? It's usually you go to the general sales manager, the owner, or something like that, and you try to pitch them on buying whatever media it is that you're wanting them to buy. And so we're like, hey, we could become subject matter experts at these guidelines. And then the pitch is just you go in and be like, hey, you've got $1 million sitting in a pot. We'll use it. We'll become your third-party marketing agency, your marketing department, right?
Yep.
And we'll leverage all this money. And we'll just take 15% cut agency commission off the top, right? So if we spend $100,000 that month, it's $15,000 goes to the business. Easy peasy, right? And then we just started squashing. So we learned the Kia co-op guidelines like the back of my hand at the time. I mean, I could packet this thick and I knew everything about it. Ford, Dodge, different, brands like that. And so that's really when it exploded.
Yeah.
That was 2016 running through 17 and into 18. So much so we went from my business partner and my assistant to, at a time, we were 17 full-time employees.
Wow.
Out of an office in Cookeville.
What was that time span of going from just the three of you to?
Yeah, it was like a year.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was a ton of growth.
Oh, yeah.
For essentially
really
at the time a kid
yeah.
who knew nothing about business, who was extremely confident, overly confident at times. And again, obviously hindsight 2020, but rightfully so in the moment, because I mean you stumbled upon a really great idea in a very niche area and just grinded, right? And
I would imagine you walking into these dealerships, they're kind of dumbfounded because you know more information on this program 100%. Than what they do.
Yeah. The pitch was so easy.
Yeah.
And they were tickled to death. Because at the end of the day, too, we'd be like, we're going to spend this money, what have you, get it all approved. If for some reason you don't get reimbursed, like we fail on something, right, then we'll just assume the cost. But outside of this, it's free money.
Yeah.
This is literally free advertising. You're already getting this money, and it was on a roller most of the time. So, like, you'd get it for 12 months, and then on the 13th month, that first month, if you didn't spend it, would fall off. And so, but you're constantly accumulating.
I got you.
The only thing is, like, we're going to help you hit that quota every month. As long as you're hitting that quota every month, we knew
the money
we were getting more money in the pot.
Yeah.
So, like, it behooved of us to obviously grind to make sure that they're hitting their targets. And so, again, it really took off.
So as y'all can see, the reason that we have latched on to Matt and Kaylee for a lot of our marketing for the Kennedy Ladd Foundation and stuff like that, because as y'all can tell already, he's not basic minded. He doesn't just, do the minimum to get stuff done. Obviously, as you're listening, what steps that you've taken to go ahead and grow this business and not, bow down to like the universe and be like, okay, I'm just going to, you tell me no, I'm going to accept that. No,
no was not on the radar. Like it was just, and I keep saying this, referencing the grind, but I mean I slept at the office for weeks at a time. I mean, I worked until I physically couldn't work anymore.
So being the dad show, I got to ask this question.
Yeah. This is where we're about to get into the meat and potatoes of all of it.
So how did that carry over into your marriage and to being a dad and that aspect of, you've got Kimber's one at this time?
She's she's one. She's the first year of having Kimber was when the majority of the success really took place. And so to kind of go back a little bit more, during this time, I say confident, really what it turned out to be was that's just absolutely the most cocky person that you could ever imagine. And I just let pride just absolutely eat me up. And I say, again, rightfully so, but it's just young, ignorant with success. And at the time, we were making a lot of money.
Yeah.
I mean, the company was making a lot of money. I was taking home a lot of money. I was rubbing shoulders and elbows with people that made a lot of money, right? And it was just, hey, and never thought I'd be in. So this was 4 years ago, right?
Yeah.
I'm flunking out of college and not wanting to go to college and having no idea what I wanted to do to this time. There is a part in this story, though, to go back at when I did flunk out of college early on, or lost scholarships and funding. I didn't really flunk out, but I had the decision to make of like how I was going to pay for it. My parents, if I recall correctly, are pretty much like at this point it's kind of on you. I think the agreement was that if you maintain a certain grade and some funding through Hope Scholarship and things like that, that they would help supplement the rest.
Oh yeah.
And so I ended up going in the National Guard during this time, and so at this point and that was 2010, excuse me, June of 2010. So in 15, I'm already 5 years in, to that. Ended up doing 8 years and getting out in 2018. But so that's going on, at this time too, weekend drills and things like that. Yeah. So a lot going on. But to go back to, so I found success, found cockiness, and during this time, I kind of completely turned away from my faith. Like I vividly remember a time, and having grown up in the church and kind of had ups and downs and things of that nature, I really struggled with, I guess, I don't want to say organized religion, but just with my faith in general. It was one of those things I felt like I used it. I used faith a lot growing up. It was like when things were good, it was, back off the radar. And the moment things didn't go my way or things were going, poorly, I was always kind of a fallback,
Yeah.
a whole nother conversation and thought around that now. But, and so I remember when I really started putting in the work, it was like, hey, this is what this life requires. Like there is no God. That's all just a feel good story. It's like a linchpin essentially that people fall on when they don't have the energy to put in that grind and really just go after what they want.
Yeah.
And so I vividly remember a time where I turned completely away from my faith. In fact, I told Kaylee, like, we'll never go to church.
Wow.
We'll never be religious. Like, God's not real. Like, this is real.
So almost turned atheism in a way.
To an extent. Yeah. Like I was done with it. Like,
yeah.
And,
because you didn't have time for it, or you were so busy and so caught up with everything that was going on and trying to manage all the branches of the tree that you just kind of lost interest at all? Or
I think it was a combination of all of it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I was so enamored with this idea of success that I'd created. And again, if you look at it through that lens, the success that we were having. And it was just like, I for the first time in my life, I'm so proud of myself and my accomplishments where I wasn't prior to that.
Yeah.
And I did all this without the first prayer, without, any of it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was just like, hey, I don't need this. This is the thing. It was almost like when I ridded my life of that teetering with faith, it was like all of a sudden the success started happening. I just became laser focused on this thing, right? And
see, that I don't want to take you off of where you're going.
Yeah.
But it's the craziest thing because Allie and I, whenever we first got together, first married, all that, like I was a partier. I'd go out drinking. I'd go hang, and I was not. I was a Christian. Mm-hmm. I knew God, but I was not living my life for God.
Yeah.
We done the right thing. We got married. Mm-hmm. We moved in. We had our kids. We got rededicated our lives, to Jesus, and got baptized again. And then it's like all heck breaks loose. We find out about Kennedy's disease, and now we got to travel to Cincinnati, and and we're like, dude, our life was so much easier when we wasn't living our life.
That's the complete opposite. It's really the complete opposite. Yeah.
And once you start finding Jesus and get closer, that's when the devil's like, okay, I got to pay attention to them and start trying to scratch that scab.
And I think, like, hindsight, looking back, it was that early immaturity in my faith where I almost hit that point where I was completely bought in.
Yeah.
Right. And like, so this was the enemy, like, putting blinders on me, basically, to be like, I don't believe that he has the power to not let you become, complete in your faith, but this was the distraction.
Yeah,
and,
I mean, he's the
and it was
deceiver,
the lie,
like, you know.
Right, yeah. So during this time, like I said, I got to that point where it was just like, if you want it, go get it. That none of this whole idea of faith and a purpose and a calling and all that is just, it's a fairy tale.
Yeah.
Right? And of course, then the wheels started falling off. So
just when you think you can handle it all by yourself.
Yeah, when you're like, I'm the man, I got this.
Yeah.
I don't need you. And then, like I said, I vividly remember having these conversations with Kaylee. And when the wheels started to fall off, man, the wheels fell off. Like, it was just like the peak of success. And then you wake up one day and it's just under attack. And so, again, hindsight,
yeah,
it's like, I felt like, God finally got to the point where he's like, I've had enough, if that's the direction you want to go, I'm going to essentially give you one more chance. And it's, I didn't want to have to get to this point, but to get my attention, it had to be dramatic because, like I said, the grind had become so extensive and the inability to accept no had become so intense that he had to really get my attention. The little things, the little bumps in the road were no longer cutting it. Yeah. During this time, to circle back to, and actually go back even previously, like I've always, I've always been a partier as well, and really struggled with alcohol at a time. I struggled with depression, anxiety, all these things, all through the early days of college. Again, so much so in 2011, I tried to take my own life. Back 2011, I was on a ton of medications for like mental health issues and things like that. I don't recall exactly, but I think it was like anywhere from maybe 6-7 different medications. Wow. And I'd gotten a lot of them filled one night. I essentially became an alcoholic. I think I drank like a whole bottle of vodka and I just turned them all up. This was living in Knoxville at the time. It was actually before I moved out to Cookeville. I was living with my cousin, and she came back to the house and actually found me there, and then, obviously ended up going to the emergency room, and that was a whole big thing.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I was suicidal probably throughout pretty much all of my early 20s. Again, just in this like, just lost, really. I mean, that's really the best way to put it. Yeah. I knew what I needed to be doing. I grew up in church. I knew the word. I knew who Jesus was. I knew, all those things, but I never really wanted to accept it, Yeah. And that's where I go back to, like, as things got difficult, I feel like I really just used it. I was using it like I used everything else, whether it was drugs or alcohol or girls or whatever it might be. And, that, again, took me through. And so, again, it goes back to, like, when I started to come out of that and I graduated college and I found Kaylee and then found success and all these things, you can kind of see naturally how I reached this point of like, hey, when I decided one day, because when I came off the medication, it wasn't the way it should have been done. I just finally had gotten to the point where I woke up and I'm done doing this. Yeah. And I just quit. Yeah. I uprooted from Knoxville. Again, wasn't doing good in college, and that's how I ended up in Cookeville. When I moved out to Cookeville, I moved out there knowing no one, like literally 0 people. My brother was out there and my sister-in-law. And I just moved out there and I said, I got to reset and start over. And so from leaving and going out there to then, fast forward 2016, 2017, and having just felt like, hey, I did this, Yeah. And so again, that's where a lot of that came to be. But again, go back what I say, like the wheels fell off. I mean, they fell off.
Before we continue that, though, I don't want to just skip over what we just talked about, because
I probably should have started with all that.
No.
I'm a little scattered all over the place, but
you're good. And we're going to, I don't know how many minutes into this podcast, people that are listening, we're going to chase some rabbits down this. Okay, and I promise you, we may not answer questions, and this may end up being a 3-hour podcast. I don't know. We'll break it up.
We may end up having to do it again and put it into a sessioning order.
No, we're good. We're good. We'll do all that in the post. But so there's a ton of people that, wrestle with depression,
Yeah.
that wrestle with anxiety, with stress, and, just the everyday pressures of life, man. And so you going to the point of wanting to take your own life, man.
Yeah.
I don't want to skip over that.
Yeah.
So, like, help the people that are listening. Obviously you got to that worst part and point in your life that you're like, this is not where I want to be.
Right.
Whether I go to heaven or hell, I just want to get out of this world.
Yes.
And so, I'm a firefighter EMT. I've ran a lot of those calls. I've seen a lot of those people. And so some of them didn't make it out.
Right.
But you did.
Mm-hmm.
And before we continue on going back to where you got to Cookeville, how and what changed your mind? Was it the time that you're like, oh my gosh, I almost really killed myself?
Yeah.
Or was there something else that brought you out of this to make you have the drive and, that you want to go?
Yeah. So I guess I should go back and really talk about where I guess a lot of the anxiety and things stem from. So I've, like I said, shared this before in a smaller setting, but I was sexually assaulted when I was younger, and that stayed with me for a really long time.
Yeah.
And so early on, just trying to, work through a lot of that and not knowing how really, I had kept this from my parents for well into my, I think, 20s, and so there was just a lot of anxiety in life in general, because of that.
Yeah.
And
that just kept piling on top because you were harboring it.
Yeah, it just kept piling on as I didn't know how to deal with it. And you just get to a point where like I think you hit it spot on when you say, like, if you can imagine getting to a state where you don't care, heaven, hell, it doesn't matter. You just want the anxiety to stop.
Yeah.
It's so overwhelming. And I remember getting there multiple times, And so when I started really struggling, like with alcohol or drugs or whatever it may be, like any typical case, like that was just a momentary fix to just numb everything else, just to distract, just to get out of your own way, to get out of your own head. To, it's really hard to be anxious when you're so drunk you can't even remember being anxious. So,
but let's hit on that.
Yeah.
So the people that are out there that are trying to find that, like, it comes back.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you can get drunk, you can get high, you can pass out and everything else. But when you wake up, I mean, and that's a continuous cycle that
100%.
Needs to be broken because it's not going to go away.
It's not going to go away. And it's, it's since been described to me as any other illness. Like, if you completely teetotally snap your ankle in half, right? And you just numb everything, or you don't walk on it, whatever the workaround might be, at the end of the day, your ankle is still snapped in half. Like, you're going to have to eventually address it and fix it. And it was the same thing, with everything that I was going through mentally is like, I just did everything I could to distract it. But at the end of the day, like you said, when you sober up or you come down from these highs or whatever it might be, like, the problem still exists. And in fact, I think the problem intensifies.
Yeah.
Right. Because now you have these recollections of not feeling that.
Yeah.
And now you're back to feeling it. And so it's just this mental, like, exhaustion that you face
On a roller coaster.
Yeah. And so, the early years of really post high school and those first several years of college. And of course, you're also in that stage of where, like, you don't know what you're doing. You're trying to figure life out. Like, friends that were friends then are no longer. Things you thought to be real. I mean, heck, sometimes just getting out of our own county for the first time. I mean, we're going to UT and realizing, like, not everybody grew up like we did, and just this overwhelmingness of not knowing who you are, mixed in with the trauma of the past, and just really being confused. Like I said, feeling like God wasn't there for you, feeling like, I'm praying for something. You don't even often know what that is. Like you're just praying to feel better.
Yeah. Or at least just relieve some of the.
Just take something. Just open the valve, man. Let the pressure go away, you know?
Yeah.
But at the same time, being at a place in life where you have the least amount of responsibilities ever. So it's just a very confusing time. I can't imagine kids these days in the environment. And how much they might struggle. So it's everything. Obviously, from that stem, self-image complexes. I mean, it could just absolute wreck, right?
Yeah.
And so, going into those early years of college, and then I started out here at Roan State. I did a year here, and then ended up at UT. And I did a year there, and partied a lot, had a lot of issues, had a really, really bad relationship when I was there. That certainly didn't help. Didn't do well in school, lost that, what have you. I think going into the military was probably the first big turning point for me, because it forced me, one, to get sober.
Okay.
You know, I left, you're gone, you go to AIT, you go to basic, what have you. I went to an OSIT, MOS, Military Occupation Specialist. I was a Cav Scout. My first unit was at Sweetwater. So I disappeared for like 9-10 weeks.
This was prior to or after?
This is after I went to UT.
Okay.
And had my first year at UT.
Okay.
Didn't do great. Lost like some scholarship stuff and funding. And so that summer, I left that June. So we ended school in May after my second year.
Okay.
And then in June, I enlisted. And so June 10th is when I started my first day of basic training. And then from June, I think until October or November, I was up at Fort Knox. And I started, I think, during that time to really unpack some things about myself. One, I was forced to get sober. So I was forced to just deal with some of the things that I'd been running from.
Yeah.
You're put into an extremely strenuous and confined, structured environment, which somebody with anxiety can often thrive in, and I did.
Yeah.
But, during that time, you're alone a lot. I mean, you got the other guys, but you have no connection to the outside world. You're training pretty much all day, and any downtime, you're not allowed to do anything but just sit and bask in your own thoughts and what have you. And so it just...
But doing it sober instead of...
it sober.
Yeah.
Doing it in really good physical shape. A lot of very positive things certainly came out of that. The difference, though, with the National Guard is you do all that, and then you leave and you come home.
Yeah.
And you're right back to...
Right where it all started.
Everybody that you knew 9 weeks, 10 weeks ago and left, everything that you maybe ran from that you're now having to reface. It's not like active duty where then you get, assigned to a unit and you go and work out your contract or however long you decide to stay. You come back, and then now there's this like, hey, on the weekend or certain times you're going to training where you have to turn on soldier and turn it off.
Yeah.
And so that was its own...
So somebody that's been out there that's dealt with what you've dealt with at an early age, that is trying to find something to numb it, to get out of, what do you recommend? Like the whole, obviously dealing with it sober and not, turn into substance abuse or any other thing. Like, how would you, if you had one piece of advice for somebody that is dealing with that, what would it be to help them overcome it?
I think the quicker that you can get to the root of, the issue. Like for me, for the longest time, I didn't even realize it was anxiety.
Yeah.
I just felt different, and I just felt off, and I felt some days were really good and some days were really bad. Therapy never was real beneficial for me, but I think it was just because I didn't understand it. I think I'm sure finding a good mentor or, a good, a really solid therapist would certainly help you unpack some of those things.
Yep.
I think there's more knowledge and understanding around a lot of these topics nowadays that we maybe didn't have even just that short time ago.
Yeah.
So I imagine there's probably some more resources and stuff out there. But ultimately at the end of the day, you got to pinpoint what it is.
Yeah.
Again, it goes back to the analogy of the ankle. It's like, if you don't know what's wrong with you, it's really difficult to work out a plan to remediate the issues that are caused by it. And so for me, hindsight, I would have just probably seen someone or just tried to understand, like, hey, well, I know what I feel, but like, what is the culprit? Like, truly, what is the culprit? And a lot of the anxiety, again, just came from not knowing where I was going, not knowing, what I should be doing, and just it was just a lot of angles, to consider. Identifying it, again, hindsight, obviously, prayer, finding a great pastor or, again, mentor or somebody that can just help you. I wish I had me now, then.
Yeah.
So just, trying to find somebody that's had a similar experience or something like that.
We felt that
extremely beneficial.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I was just going to say, we found that with our kids' disease. Like, we went through it and we're like, we don't really, because there was a lot of negativity.
Yeah.
It was a Facebook group, and there was just a lot of hardened parents, that had a lot of negativity in that group on Facebook about their disease. And we was just like, no, we're not going to associate. Like, I don't want the negativity. Mm-hmm. We're going to focus on our child, and we're going to move on that way. So it's kind of the same aspect as you. Once we got with families that had the same disease, that had been through the same stuff, had been through the hospital stays, the bone marrow transplants, the surgeries, yada, yada, yada. Like, it was like family, man. Like, it was unbelievable, the connection that we had with these families, because you didn't have to explain yourself. Everybody you meet that hasn't been through that, you have to explain exactly where you've come from, what you've been through, and it feels like you're telling the same old story. But when you connect with somebody that's been through it and knows exactly the feeling of it, man, you don't have to explain it. They already know. Yep. And that connection is... So please, if you're out there and you're struggling with something, no matter what it is, try to find, there's tons of Facebook groups for other stuff, like asking your community, your pastor, somebody that you can connect with, because I promise you, it will help you so much if you can just find that person and that group or whatever it may be. I'm sure there's nonprofits for most of everything as well. But find a resource. I'm begging you not to resort to substance abuse, to working your life away, to everything. Just like Matt said, hit it head on and go after it. Yes, it's going to suck. Yes, it's going to be hard, but it'll be a whole lot better for you.
Absolutely. So, yeah, and you're exactly right. I mean, even as I look back early then, again, this was all pre, moving out to Tech and moving out to Cookeville, which is really kind of, I know we may edit this around to make it all make a linear sense, if you will, but there was a lot that took place before I ever uprooted and moved. And when I uprooted and moved, well, everything I'd distracted myself with up to this point, drugs and alcohol, girls, hobbies, sports, I think in high school was obviously a big one.
Yeah.
And then running from it, going to Cookeville, and then what ended up, happening in Cookeville and the business and all, like, it all was running. Yeah. Every bit of it was running.
Yeah.
It was just, how can I distract?
Yep.
And it obviously,
now it makes more sense.
It obviously wasn't until way later in my life that I was forced to, and we'll get back to kind of when like I said earlier, when the wheels really started to fall off. And I think God forced me to be like, hey, you can't run anymore. Like, if you're going to run, it needs to be to me. And that was, I'd ran everywhere else, but ran to him, and he'll get your attention.
Yeah.
He doesn't fail at that. Yeah. And some people, unfortunately, it takes getting to that point. So I guess to go back and answer your question again, I would just, goes back to identifying, the root problem and not running, run to him, lean into, and really try to understand, and it's just something I didn't do. I just distracted. Everything was a distraction. Yeah. And it's why I become so obsessed with things. It's why, and again, as I learned to channel those later in life, it's been rewarding in some ways. But early on, it was just whatever I could distract myself with.
Yeah.
To numb the pain and the anxiety.
And I have to say, like, if I'm going to add something to that, one of the main things that I took, actually, I'm going to say two things. One of them was a guy at work. I was kind of new, beginning in my faith,
Mm-hmm.
almost like a brand new baby deer trying to walk is how I looked, trying to walk with God. And a guy at work told me, we just found out about Kennedy and knew about that. And he's like, Ryan, like, you're trying to walk with God. You're trying to do everything and you're praying to him. But there's going to come a day when you're not going to be able to pray. But I want you to know that God understands your tears. And me being me, I was like, dude, whatever. Like, no matter how hard I'm crying, no matter what, I can always say a prayer in the back of my head. And it hit me one day. Yeah. I was at home and I was crying so hard that, and this was very early on with us finding out Kennedy's diagnosis, that I just hit my knees, dude, and I threw my hands up. Yeah. And it was literally like God reached down and picked that weight off of me immediately. And I was able to stand up and do what I was doing. And so from that moment on, I just, when I stood up, I said, God, I can't handle this here. And I took my hands and made the motion of giving my daughter to God, because I can't handle it, but you can. I'm just her earthly father. You, her ultimate father. She's yours first. Yeah. Your will be done. And so whether that's a child or whatever you're dealing with, or, anything of that nature, I ask that, not only do you turn to God, not only do you turn to that group like we talked about, but I mean, and it may be, people may be laughing, may be stupid to think, but man, when you take the motion of literally handing it to God and telling him to take it, it feels like he takes it, man. And so I was able to do more stuff, be stronger for my wife and for my daughter through everything that we've been through.
Oh, 100%. And I think you're exactly right. I mean, the thing I would add to that is that, like, I find that I have to do that very often because I'm still very immature in my walk. Yeah. Like, extremely immature. I find myself falling into those same tendencies, I find myself allowing myself to be distracted. It's not as intense today. It's not as detrimental. It can be, humor or whatever. It's obviously it's matured in that aspect to some degree. But at the end of the day, a distraction is a distraction. Like, does it really matter what it is? But I say that to say, like, I still to this day struggle with, I don't want to say forgetting, but like forgetting how I got here and who I am and why I am and where my faith is. And so I think, I said earlier, like, I have this idea early on of, like, I was using God. It was like when things got bad, it did seem like it was a ripcord. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And hindsight, I've said that a million times, but he has pulled me out of each one of those occurrences. And it's probably been about a year ago I really started thinking. In fact, I talked to JT about, I was like, man, one day I would love to write a song, as nerdy as that is, about this concept of using God. Yeah. Because that's really what he died for. Yeah. And I felt so ashamed for the times where I've gotten to this point and I've come back and I've used him. Right. But it's like I have this like scenario that plays out in my head of like him standing there being like, it's literally why I died. Yeah. So my perception around that has changed. Now it's become more of like, how do I become more stable on the day to day of not having to have this feeling of like, hey, I'm leveraging his grace. Yeah. Right. But there is, I think, an aspect of that where he's like, every time he's like, when you come back, that's what I want. Yeah. Always. Yeah. But the time, like I said, when I really just said I'm done, that's when it was rough. And at some point I will cry during this podcast.
No, you're good.
I'm trying not to. But,
no, you're great.
But yeah, so again, going back, your original question was all this is like, how did we get back here to Kingston? So I left Roan State, UT, not good, military, an attempt at suicide when the pressure, was just too intense to handle. thank God for my cousin and his protection over me during that time. Struggled, uprooted, went to Cookeville, and everything that, ended up playing out there. I ended up finding success in school. I did graduate 2013. And to go back to the how did the things work out with Kaylee? We were best friends all through college. I tried to date her multiple times. So we have a funny story because I asked her out on a text message. She says that's why she said no, but that's not why she said no. It was completely appropriate to ask someone on a date via text message.
Oh yeah. Now
She said
people
no.
call in sick to work on text message.
Yeah, what are we talking? What are we doing here? So we ended up best friends. But really, the truth is that everyone graduated, and we all started kind of to figure out what was next in life, and that chapter was closing, and so we all were getting jobs, and I had gotten a job at Enterprise Rent a Car, and Kaylee had she'd been working, but she had been interviewing elsewhere, and she interviewed for a job out here in Knoxville, and I was at training in Nashville for Enterprise, and we had been texting, and she, like I said, I've been trying to get her to date me, and everybody had left. Our friend group had left, and we really were the only two left in Cookeville, so we were still going out and hanging out, but it was just as friends, and she was on her way back, and she was texting me, and I was like, how did it go? And she was like, oh, I think it went really great. Maybe an hour later or something, she texted me, she said, hey, I just got a call from this company, and they want to make me a job offer. And so I'm like, well, there it goes. There's my chance. That ship's sailing. And I texted her and I said, well, did you take it? And she said, no. And so I replied back and I was like, why? And she wrote back and said, you. So I went back from training, and then on her doorstep, I kissed her for the first time. And then 6 months later, we got engaged. So I tricked her and finally convinced her. But
did you do a little hypnotization?
I did, yeah. It was a super sweet story and something that we talk about often. But yeah, from that point, it moved pretty quickly. And like I said, then we ended up quitting my job on my lunch break, and then the rest of the story picks back up. But yeah, so I guess to go back really where, I said the wheels fell off. This is, I guess, the last sort of part of if you will, my testimony. But so we'd gotten to that point, we'd found success, and completely turned our back on God, on religion, on church, on all of it. And during that time, the grind of working K2 and the long hours and what have you, I had been on and off Adderall for like ADHD and things of that nature throughout pretty much all of my early adulthood. Never had an issue with it. In fact, in a lot of ways, it was very beneficial. It was the only medication that I ended up on and stayed on after I'd quit, all the different mental health medications and things that led to the suicide attempt. And I was on it then. And as some people do, I just started abusing it. So started taking more and more to be able to work more, to stay up later, to just to just get stuff done. I mean, we'd gotten to the point where the business grew way too quick. And so when we talk about the contracts and the amount of money and stuff that was coming in and the growth, there was obviously a lot of money going out. The thing that got very interesting in that business model is cash flow. So all of your vendors that you're buying media with, they all have different terms. Yeah. Most of them are you owe your bills within 90 days. It's net 90. Some are 60, some are 30, some are 120, some will work with you, right? Some are like, hey, as long as you're giving us a certain amount of money every month, like we'll just keep this relationship going. But when you imagine that you've got all these different buys that you're buying on behalf of all this other money coming in.
Oh, yeah.
So I'll put it this way. You make a buy on a co-op program. That company, that business doesn't hit their quota that month. So they have to lag a month, or the fund gets lower, what have you. You're trying to make a lot of stars align within the terms of what you owe money to the vendors.
Yeah.
And so we ran into a huge cash flow issue. We had a joke at the office, and my staff at one point got me some croquis on the sunglasses that said the check's in the mail, because that was always the excuse, and you try to get money. It's in the mail. We've mailed it.
Yeah.
I was like, are we hand delivering, at the post office nowadays?
Yeah.
Or like where is every check getting lost to K2, right?
Yeah.
And so there was always this issue with cash flow, and we ran into a really difficult situation in late 2017. And what ended up happening is iHeartMedia, we owed them a pretty substantial amount of money. The money always came.
Yeah.
Our accounts receivable was as legit as any. It was just, it was always a little bit off on when it came.
Yeah.
And so we had gone to iHeart, and we were a bit behind on some vendors, and we tried to negotiate some terms, and some things went south, and probably made some comments that didn't need to be made, and frustrated some folks out there. And so long story short, they went to one of our biggest clients and said, essentially, hey, K2's not paying your bill. They're buying on your behalf. They're spending your money.
Yeah.
You're paying them, but they're not paying your bill. Well, like any other business, we look at it as all the money comes in and then all the money goes out.
Yeah.
At that point, we're not buying on behalf of Miracle Ford and just specifically taking their money and paying Miracle Ford's vendor bills, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
We're looking at it as all this money comes in, and we've got all this money due.
Yeah.
And as long as we're hitting that every month, then it's just like any other business,
Yeah.
right? You don't go do a landscaping project, right?
Yeah.
And have bought a lawnmower. And because I paid you for using that lawnmower, you're going and taking that money and directly making sure that you pay that lawnmower, right? You're just looking at the business operation and running it that way. That obviously didn't set well. And they dropped. They pulled their contract.
Wow.
And then from there, another one found out, and they pulled. And then they started talking, and they pulled, and they pulled. And so we went from just this high of high to an absolute scramble.
What time frame?
This took place 2 months later. I started cutting staff.
Wow.
I let go of the first 2 or 3 employees. It intensified, and over probably 6 to 8 months, I think we were back down to like 2 employees and Rami and myself.
So we're talking about a time frame of less than 2 years that you went basically from nothing
to
in
extreme success.
to extreme success.
We're talking multi-million gross as a company. We're talking not even shy of a couple 100,000 gross. This is not obviously what we were taking home, not even remotely close, but just as a business in that first year to over $1 million the next. And then in year 3, we're talking, several.
Wow.
To
6 to 8 months, nothing.
Almost nothing.
Yeah. Wow.
Because when the wheels started to fall off, they fail.
Yeah.
And you can imagine, you're talking, these are big accounts. They were big contracts. Obviously, when it first started to happen, we went to the banks and tried to get, a line of credit or something.
Yeah.
And the justification was like, look at our accounts receivable. We've got 2 years of great accounts receivable. And you can see here, everything always came, and the money did always come.
Yeah.
We're like, it's just not always coming in the time frame that we needed. We need funding. But I'm 27 at the time, we have a mortgage on the house, but we don't own anything outright. The business consists of an office we pay rent on and a bunch of MacBook Pros. Like, we have no collateral. We have nothing for them to come, leverage the bank.
Yeah.
And we just couldn't get a loan.
Hindsight, there's some people I'm sure I could have called and had them co-sign and do some things like that. And other business owners that I now know that if they'd have looked at our accounts receivable, probably would have been like, I'll give you the money.
Yeah.
And can I be an equity partner in it,
exactly.
right? Because the model that we had worked. It just, we ran into a cash flow and really an ignorance problem, and I didn't know how it worked, and I didn't know how to secure funding. And so, like I said, when the wheels fell off, and we lost everything. I at that time was addicted to Adderall. I was doctor shopping and getting it from multiple doctors, which it ended up finding out. And so overnight, I'd lost pretty much all my well-being financially and all of the drugs that were holding me up. And went into withdrawal and just a miserable time. This was actually, we had Briggs at this point. So Briggs was born through all of this. So here I am, unable to provide financially, unable to provide as a father mentally and stability. Like, I just was a mess.
Yeah.
And that same time, this was 2018. So in 2018, I also had finished out my contract with the National Guard. And while I was in with the National Guard, I had a life insurance policy. Well, getting out of that, I lost my insurance. Kaylee not working.
Yeah.
And me being a small business owner, our insurance was supplied by TRICARE through the military. And And so the first thing I did was like, hey, I need to apply for a civilian life insurance policy. So I went down to the local shelter agent there in Cookeville, and took out a life insurance policy. And, they come out and they do a physical. And they came to my house, they did the physical or what have you. I'm again coming out of probably a month now of withdrawals, and finally, honestly, to the point where I was able to get out of bed and start to get on the computer again and do anything.
Yeah.
And a week or so later, I got an email that said that my life insurance policy got denied. And so I'm like, okay, why? And so I had to request the results or what have you, and so I ended up getting them, and my liver enzymes were like in the thousands, like my AST, ALT, bilirubin, like anything liver related was teetotally jacked up.
Wow.
So I'm like, well, obviously, some of that, the extent of the withdrawal and all that is like, because there was a time during that when I remember talking to Kaylee, and I'm like, something is not right.
Yeah.
This is not just withdrawal. Like I've gone through withdrawals from other substances and things like that, and this is something is more. And so when we got that report back, it was like, okay, we got something. I'm not also no longer healthy. Like this stress, this anxiety, this business literally has almost killed me.
Yeah.
And so I started seeing a client of mine was a clinic. So I went to him, and he started running tests, and we ran tests for a couple of weeks. He ended up running a test for hepatitis C. And so the way that they run this blood work, as you I'm sure know, is they test for antibodies.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if you're positive for an antibody, they assume you have the virus.
Yeah.
And I tested positive for hepatitis C antibodies. And so he calls me up one day. He's like, dude, you've got hepatitis C. And I'm like, obviously, I'd only seen what I'd seen on commercials and stuff like that. So I do what everybody does, and I went to Google. And it's terrible. I mean, that's a terrible disease.
Oh, yeah.
So we're going back through like how, first of all, I never did, I never what was intravenous in whatever what it's drugs that are
you're not
shots,
shooting up at all. Yeah.
Right. I've got tattoos, but they were with reputable, stuff like that. So I'm like, I had no idea how I could get, hepatitis C. Long story short, I didn't have insurance, and there was a program there. So there's a medication now called Ep.20, and it had recently come out, and it's essentially a cure for Hep C. And so I'm like, that's a positive.
Yeah.
Because he told me, he said, when he called and told me, he said, but the good thing is that they are careful about calling it a cure. It'll go into full remediation and live a normal life.
Yeah.
It's like $1,000 a day for the pill. Yeah.
Wow.
You take a pill for a year. And so
basically
applied,
$365,000.
more. We didn't have any money. We was broke again. Like broke, owing money. And so obviously I'm like, how can anything get any worse than this? There was a program that I applied for, not having insurance. Not having insurance was God sent. Had I had insurance, it would have broke us.
Yeah.
Not having insurance, I was able to qualify for a program where you could be considered as part of like another trial and this, that, and the other, and I could do it for free.
Wow.
Literally for free. I applied, got approved, this, that, and the other. He goes to get ready to put me on this medication, and the last test they have to run is a viral load test, essentially to see how much of the virus. My understanding is to kind of see how much milligram of medication or whatever they scientifically do to decide what to put you on. So I get this viral load test, and I get a call a day later, and he's like, dude, you don't have hepatitis C. He's like, you've got the antibody, but you don't have the disease.
Wow.
And if you look up, like that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It's not a thing. And so here we go. We go down a rabbit hole for like maybe 6 months, this is 2018, 6 months, a year maybe. And I ended up at some specialty doctors and this, that, and the other, and I had a biopsy and what have you. And luckily they sent it off to Vanderbilt. It got to that point, that intense, and they sent it to the liver unit there at Vanderbilt, and it was like the same day they diagnosed it with autoimmune hepatitis. And so,
never heard of that.
Nobody has.
Yeah.
It's called AIH. It's extremely rare. In fact, I think if you look it up, there's like maybe 20,000 cases a year or something like that. I mean, it's extremely rare, and maybe less. And 90% in women. So I'm like, here we go. Here we are. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
The rarest of rare, and then subcategory of that is even more rare. No cure, right? And the only thing you can do is like most autoimmune diseases, try to get it under control. And so I went on a very heavy dose of prednisone to get this inflammation and stuff in the liver, to get the liver enzymes down, and then an immune suppressant drug to lower my immune system or the activity so that my body would essentially stop attacking my liver.
Yeah.
And we still don't know to this day how you get it, what it's caused by. My mom has an autoimmune disease. I don't know if that has anything to do with it. I would imagine it's a lot of substance abuse and stress and things like that.
Yeah.
But long story short, we have no idea where it came from or why. That was 2018. I had since hung up the business and had taken a job out in Nashville when I was going through this process. I was driving back and forth to Nashville, and I got the call to tell me what it was. And so I remember getting off the phone and, again, went to Google, the worst thing you could do. And the first statement that popped up said that autoimmune patient life expectancy is like 5 to 10 years.
Wow.
I since went on to read further after that shock that it is, if gone untreated, and not able to essentially get it into remission.
Yeah.
But you can imagine, I was devastated.
Yeah.
I'm driving home from Nashville after work, and I'm like shaking, essentially getting ready to call Kaylee and say, hey, good news is we found out what it is.
Bad news
is I got about 5 to 10 years left, right? So that call was extremely difficult.
So you did make the call.
I did make the call, and, obviously got home, and just a lot of confusion and shock, and just, where do we go from here? We went from, again, the highest of highs. Our marriage obviously struggled through all of that. We got to a point where we were so deep in the business that it felt like we couldn't get out of it even if we wanted. We had individuals that had uprooted from other areas of Tennessee and moved there to work. We were responsible for other people's well-being, and that all got destroyed. And it was just a trying time, on our marriage, on my health, on everything. And so
Kimber and Briggs were how old at this time?
Kimber at this point in 2018 was 3, and Briggs was just born.
Wow.
And he was still an infant.
So how did you feel at that point in time, as, obviously with your background and everything, but, everything else you could almost, in your mental capacity, like, man, I can overcome that. Whether I'm working all the time, whether I'm doing substance abuse, whether I can overcome it. And so you're like,
can't beat it.
Yeah, like there's nothing I can do. So you as a husband, you as a father, like what went through your mind and mental capacity at that point in time?
So I've since realized that a lot of my anxiety, and due to earlier, again, traumas and things like that, the culprit for the majority of my anxiety is control. When I can't control something, is when I become uncontrollably anxious.
You related to my wife?
So we can get to that in a minute. Yeah. One day her and I are going to fist fight. I can guarantee you. Our anxieties are not going to allow us to not fist fight. But when I don't have control, and so I'm so glad that you bring that up, because that was a big realization for me, is like God forced me to realize that. Yeah. When he gave me something that for the first time I could not fix. Yeah. Like, this was just, hey, bud, is out of your control. Yeah. Like it doesn't matter how hard you work. It doesn't how much numbing of, intrusive thoughts or whatever it might, like, this is it, dude. You cannot fix this. Yeah. Right. And like I said, that was for me, unfortunately, as devastating as that news was and is, even still today, because I'm still affected severely by this disease. Few people know that I have it. And we can talk about that in a minute, but it was like, I'm going to plague you with this, essentially. Yeah. You're going to have this for the rest of your life. You can't get rid of it. There's nothing you can do about it, right? And it gave me really no option, but for the first time, to start to come back to, the root, come back to my faith, and
To fully rely on him.
yep. And again, I hate that it came to that.
Yeah.
It's such a weird place to be when you're almost thankful for what could be, and maybe one day will be, a terminal illness.
Yeah.
But it's something that helps me every day remember that I can't not have him.
Yeah.
And I've since had this idea of, when I think about, my liver disease, this idea of life in general where, and I've compared it before when I've kind of told people this story, is like vacation, right? Like if you plan a vacation and you embark on that vacation, like never one, for most people, unless you're a psychopath, at no point were you like uber stoked about the ride there. Like that's not what you, like that just happens to be a part of.
Yeah.
Right. And in order to get to the destination, there's a ride, whether that's a plane ride or that's a car ride or a walk or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But the focus is on the destination. And then when we go through this life and we become so obsessed, with the ride,
Yeah.
and we lose focus of where we're going and the destination. And so this disease is like a daily reminder of what, this doesn't matter.
Yeah.
None of it
I agree. What truly matters
is where we're going.
Yeah.
And again, I hate that my stubbornness forced me to, for him to put me in this situation. But I'm also extremely thankful most days, even though some days Kaylee would highly disagree that I'm not. I'm so thankful for this reminder.
Yeah.
And it doesn't give me an option to forget anymore. It doesn't give me an option to hide from it or distract myself from it. I live with it every day. And the biggest symptom is just exhaustion. Like if you look it up, it's essentially like even in when you've remediated or in remission,
Yeah.
you just deal with chronic fatigue. And from the time I wake up to the time I go to bed, it's just, I'm tired. And I know everybody is.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying like, oh, I'm more tired, but the disease just makes me exhausted. But it's in that exhaustion that, like I said, I'm able to remind myself of like, you have so much, and just to recenter and refocus on gratitude and grace and forgiveness. And again, I'm not great at it. This is a journey. I'm an infant.
But we're not meant to be. We're supposed to live that way, but no human being is able to fully, we're not perfect by any means.
100%.
And we can beat ourselves up every day, but you can strive for greatness and you can shoot for the stars.
Yeah.
But you
fail.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to what we talked about earlier. These two sort of concepts, if you will, of like, I'm more focused today on the destination, and I try at least, even when things just become very burdensome and complicated or anxious or whatever, I find those times are much shorter. They haven't gone away.
Yeah.
But I'm able to dig out of them significantly quicker than I used to, because of this reminder of, you're focusing on the ride.
Yeah.
It's not the ride we're focused on.
Yeah.
It's the destination at the end. It's the vacation that we're going to go on that's going to last forever.
Yeah.
And so it does help, and it has empowered me more than any success or amount of money or really anything. And so, it's been a huge blessing. And since then, actually, just a couple months ago, for the first time, I got a call from my doctor, and my blood work has been completely normal all year. and I'm not on any medication for the first
Wow.
time since I was diagnosed.
Yeah.
And so,
That's
as far
awesome.
as a treatment is concerned, we've found success, and it's in what we would consider remission.
Yeah.
My liver enzymes will still fluctuate from time to time, like they'll still be off. I do have cirrhosis of the liver. I had that back as early as 2018. I've not had a biopsy since. We bypassed the option essentially to get a biopsy. I think it was last year, just under the understanding of like, hey, there's more. We know that. Anytime you have the inflammation, you've got scarring. And until I really start to have other physical problems, I have a MELD score, which is I think it stands for medical end-life liver disease score. And that's kind of how they measure you of where or when you will go on a transplant list. So at some point, likely, I will end up with a higher MELD score, and that will put me on a list. And then that score, as it intensifies or grows, will put me higher on that list. And so hopefully if we get to that point, I'm able to get that. And that doesn't, again, cure the disease. You'll still have it, but it will essentially, if you're able to accept the transplant, then you'll kind of reset the clock.
Yeah.
You get a new engine, if you will.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a constant reminder. And it's really been the only thing that has ever kept me grounded and focused on my faith, and just like I said, living with a heart of gratitude and just being thankful for even the bad days.
Oh yeah. Being there, being able to be present and be with your family. 100%. And I think that the heart of this story of what you just told kind of goes back to what I say, that, when people hear about our story with our kids and what we've been through, they're like, well, God's not going to put more on you than what you can handle. Yeah. And I'm like, no, I'm gonna go a step further with that. God's gonna put just a little bit more on you than what you can handle, so that you turn to Him.
100%.
That you're not like, I can handle it myself. I can take care of it. I don't need you, God. He's gonna put more on you than you can handle, and He will test you
100%
at some point in time, and get your attention and make you turn to Him, because it's a last resort. I mean, that's the same way with our kids. I'm not gonna say a last resort, but it's the only resort. Yeah. Because no way could me or my wife handle what we've been through with my kids. Just 100%. Just us trying to do it. We would have been in substance abuse. We would have been drowning in something, and probably not on this earth if we hadn't turned our lives to God and said, please help us, please take care of us, and fully, like you said, fully rely on God. I've got a friend that his nickname is Frog. Because
I know him. He goes to Grove.
And that's what he's got, a bracelet says fully rely on God. And man, that's I think there's no truer statement for this story than that right there.
Yeah. And coming back here during that time, I ended up randomly on LinkedIn I had a recruiter reach out about circling actually back to the very beginning of K2, a web developer position at ORNL. So when I first got that diagnosis, I didn't quite have this realization, right?
Yeah.
Again, we were in a place where we had just now liquidated the business and paid off debts and things like that, and we ended up making out okay. My parents helped me with finalize some things, and this was right before COVID, and I got a message from a recruiter from ORNL on LinkedIn. They were looking for a WordPress web developer, and I had that skill and information kind of on my LinkedIn resume. It's tough to get in out there. I never thought I'd end up out there. Growing up here, a lot of times that's a dream job. It was not even on my radar. And I got a call. I interviewed. It was like bam, bam. I mean, I don't even think it was a week.
Wow.
That they called and offered me a job.
Yeah.
I think maybe a day or two before I got the offer from that job, randomly, not on Kaylee's radar. My Aunt Debbie, who is friends with Pam May, Pam and her had been talking, and Pam needed a director of marketing at the Rhone Alliance. And my Aunt Debbie was like, my nephew's wife does that because of K2 and everything. She had started working a little bit for K2 when it really grew. And same thing happened. Bam, bam. Called her up. And it was like, I think the next day after having a conversation with her, Pam called her back.
Wow.
It was like, hey, we'd like to make you an offer on a job. So we were moving back to Roane County was not on our radar. In fact, moving back to Roane County was something that we didn't want to do. We said when we left, like, we'll never go back.
Yeah, that's what everybody says.
And so I got the diagnosis. It was like maybe 2 weeks later, I got the message on LinkedIn. And then within that same week, or maybe the following week, Kaylee got an offer to come back as well.
Wow.
So it was like, well, I guess we're going back to Roane County.
Yeah.
And this was at the very, this was actually, 2019 at this point. So right before COVID happened. And so we're like, okay, my Aunt Debbie being a realtor, we're like, we need to list her house. She listed our house. So we had like 8 offers or something like that.
Wow.
We listed it like 8 in the morning, and by 5 p.m. we had it under contract. We put like a 30-day turnaround on it.
Wow.
And started packing up stuff and had nowhere to go back here. And we took those jobs. We packed up everything in the U-Haul and we moved back, and we moved in with my parents. The same time, 2 doors down, my mamaw, she'd fallen on bad health, and she'd actually moved in with my Aunt Debbie and Uncle Artie. And so we ended up buying her house. We renovated it, and then we lived there for a year. During that time, I don't know why, but I had texted Chase Clem and asked him where he went to church. And he told me that he went to the Grove. And I don't even recall. We were still kind of in his mindset of like, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
That's not what we're going to be.
Yeah.
And we showed up one morning, and for years after, I don't think we missed a service.
Wow.
And we found that community, and Tyler and Philip and JT and a gentleman named Grant, who's now back in Athens, and Chase, and just a bunch of people I grew up with, and Riley, and just felt like home again. Like, that church has been so much to us and to our walk. And Philip has been just, I don't talk to him a lot, but just it's been such a light in our life. Like,
yeah,
the whole church in general has been just an unbelievable blessing. And like I said, it was all purposed. And you look back at that and think like, you can't draw that up if you wanted to.
No, exactly.
I could have went after the job at ORNL and probably never gotten it.
Yeah.
Kaylee could have looked forever here and not landed what she's landed. And so many of those things have led to where we're at career-wise now, and really just been able to rebuild, saying that we would never do the business again. You look back at it hindsight and you're like, hey, yeah, that was a traumatic experience. But at the end of the day, as we've now started back, we know what that looks like. We know the cheat code. We learned so much through that of what to do and what not to do, that we've been able to find success again in that. And so it's just like, you can't go back now and deny that every single one of those things, we're just leading to and equipping us to be, where we're at today. And, and like I said, do not get me wrong, it's so much growth that still needs to happen, but we just feel unbelievably and undeniably blessed by everything that took place and everything that led to, where we're at today, and meeting people like you and getting to work with the foundation. And just, we have such a give back mentality now, because we just focus so much, on trying to be selfless, and just, it's so rewarding now to be blessed with these talents and these gifts, really, and be able to contribute.
But isn't it so crazy, hindsight?
Yeah.
That you think that this is the worst of the worst, and yes, it was. I mean, I'm not going to downplay that by any means, but to see God was building you for something. And I think back on the stupid stuff that I've done, and I worry and pray that Lincoln and Kennedy don't do any of that stuff. But,
or no.
But, even though it was the dumbest stuff I've ever done in my life, and I made plenty of mistakes, that's the only way I learn. You can tell me not to do it. I've got to make the mistake to learn it myself. Yeah. But, not to go on a long tangent, but all that stuff was building me to where, and to where we are today.
Yeah. It's just so hard to see that in the moment.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So going back to your question about what would you tell people, is just take it all in. Stop for a minute
Yeah.
And just know that, you know, with every one of those hurdles and every one of those bad times, like at some point you're going to look back. And if you're willing and accepting, you can see it through his lens and not yours. And when you can get to that point, it's just, you want to talk about medication for anxiety, you know? It makes it so much easier now when things don't go our way to just remember that it's never gone our way. It's not going to go our way.
It's not your way.
It's not our way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like I said, I can't stress enough how much we still struggle, but just overall, man, we're in just such a better place. And I've got two beautiful kids, polar opposites of each other for anybody that might listen that know them. And I've got one that tries me. He's an interesting cat, but I see so much in both of them. And to be honest, again, going back to those things like Kimber, she's still to this day, soccer and some of the social things that we've been able to get her in have helped her so much. But there were several years where she was crippled by anxiety.
Wow.
Like early on, she had an eating disorder because of it. You know, she was very unhealthy at a time. Kaylee and I were looking through photos just here recently, and we saw a photo one evening I took of her when she was sick, and I mean it was basically a skeleton wrapped in skin, and it was like that was just 2 years ago.
So what do you think was the cause of that initially starting? Because kids aren't born with anxiety.
So
you know what I mean?
That's been a question that we've asked. It's like some of this stuff I feel like perhaps is inherited. I don't know. But I say that because, again, this is not me when I say this. Don't hear what I'm not saying. It's not me saying like, oh, I was able to help her, but because of what he put me through.
Yeah.
You know, we were able.
Number one, you was able to recognize it.
Was able to recognize it.
Yeah.
Like quickly.
Yeah.
And now she recognizes, like she knows when she's anxious. She knows exactly what it is. She knows exactly what it feels like. She can delineate between nerves and anxiety.
Yeah. Or
actual, like, say, stomach sickness and stuff, because she gets stomach migraines. That's her anxiety is really in her stomach.
Okay.
But like I said, what a blessing. I'd go back through all of it, you know, to be able to help her.
Yeah.
And so there's just undeniable when you look at it, how he was crafting and molding and preparing me to be, you know, like you said, their secular father, if you will, their worldly father.
Yeah.
All the way to the ADD and the rambunctiousness in my son, you know. And we're still learning, you know, again, every day how to be better parents. But it's just, I can't harp on enough that it's just, you got to slow down. You got to think about it through his lens. And really the sooner that you can do that, you know, the better off that you're going to be.
So now I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, but you know, what you went through, the time you spent away and everything that you've been through, do you feel now that you are more of a present father, present husband, more aware that you, whenever you do get busy with work, you know, because that's, you know, I understand your mentality of, you know, we're going to go and do what we can, but are you more aware yourself of whenever you start to travel down that path to divert you away from being 100%. With your family? Yeah.
100%. Yeah. And because, and if you know my wife, you may not, she's an interesting young lady.
She's great.
She's amazing.
Yes, she is.
You have to really get to know her, though, to understand that she's very similar to me. Like on the surface, she's complete opposite.
Yeah.
But, and even she will have to slow down. But she helps calibrate our family probably more than anything or anyone. So she recognizes most of the time before I do. But I certainly do.
Yeah.
And there was a time where she would attempt to insert the governor and throttle things down, where I would fight back on it, you know. And now it's such a blessing because it's like, if I'm not seeing it, it takes just a short conversation before it's like, yeah, you're right. We're getting back to that point. Again, It goes back to, we've seen what that looks like. And so we can see ourselves start to, migrate in that direction. And we're like, we're not going there. Again, not perfect at it. But our kids, I think are much better off because of the trials and things that we had to go through.
How about your marriage? Is it stronger with what you've had to go through?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
From hitting the highs to highs, to lows to lows, and then back now to where you are today. Do you feel like that helped your marriage?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we, like anybody, we struggle. We go through the peaks and valleys like everybody. Yeah. But the biggest thing that we've taken from all of it is that, the way in which we communicate. Like, growing up, my mom was always like, anytime there was an issue, it was like you would sit down and you would just put it all out there, and you'd sort through it. And you'd take the pros and the cons, and you would just kind of analyze everything. And that's always stuck with me. And Kaylee and I have really adopted that, in our own marriage. And there was a time where we certainly didn't. Again, I was and still struggle with being a very selfish person. Yeah. It's just who I am. I know that about myself. I try not to be. I get my mindset on like, this is what we're going to do, or this is what we're going to create, or whatever. This is where we're going to go. Yeah. And it's hard sometimes to, talk me off of that. But I've just, realized like most that, you just have to slow down. You have to communicate. And so we kind of take that same approach. We have the difficult conversations. We don't let things boil. That was a learned behavior on her part, because she's not a talker. In the beginning, she didn't want to talk about her feelings at all, any of them.
I think that's most women too. Like me, like if me and Allie have something that's, sitting there,
we have to talk about
like, I want to get it out. Yes. Let's hash it out. Like you said, let's fist fight if we need to.
Yeah.
I mean,
because it causes so much anxiety. Like if you don't, and that sits with me and my personality, that's one of those drivers for that really high anxiety. Yeah. And when I become anxious is when I become my worst. Yeah. And so she's realized that, and thankfully so, she's overcome that. I don't want to say inability to communicate, but the lack of desire to want to communicate. And we've become extremely effective communicators, and there's no holding back on how you feel or how strongly you feel. Yeah. And we talk every day about something. And again, we're not perfect. No, we're still growing significantly year over year.
But I think that's one of the huge, like, especially in my field, is being in the firefighting industry. Like, we have to communicate. Mm-hmm. There is no, mediocre there. Like, you have to have clear, concise communication. And I tell my wife all the time, like, we need triple C here, because I need clear, concise communication on what's going on in our relationship, what's going on with the foundation, what's going on with the kids, because, that can get skewed. And that once that gets skewed a little bit, and every day can cause a bunch of problems.
100%.
And
especially when you're doing essentially business together, right? Yeah. That's something you've heard us on calls before joke. Right now, Kaylee and I are not working remote, but for the longest time, actually until really recently, her and I were essentially, remote. And so, I work a full-time job, so the Hilco stuff always had to come after, but in the mornings, for a time, she at a time transitioning between real estate and what have you, had a lot more time to run Hilco during the day. But before I even started with my actual job in the morning, we would sit down and have a staff meeting, right? And the staff just consisted of her and I. But it was a way in which we would talk every day about, we would use our task management softwares and things like that to make sure that we understood what was priority today. Yeah. And how we were going to get there and when. And what have you. And part of that was also making sure that we hit those metrics in order to be able to put it down and spend the time with the family or go together to a soccer practice. Sometimes, unfortunately, going together to a 2-hour soccer practice and getting to sit there and watch our daughter do something that she loves, but talk with friends. The Cooks are really good friends of ours, and their daughter's in the same on the same soccer team. So some of that fellowship is scheduled almost.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
For some people, they don't maybe understand quite how busy, the day-to-day is with us and with fellow business owners. I love being around folks like you because, you get it. And that's not a dig at anybody that doesn't.
Yeah.
I envy a lot of people that
100%,
don't have
yes.
those burdens from time to time, and they're rewarding as much as they are a burden sometimes. But yeah, again, going back to that effective communication. I mean, we talk constantly, and we have to because we do business together too.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we both are at an age and a time in our careers where we're really pushing those along, and that comes with a lot of responsibility. I just took a leadership position at O&L, which has been a huge learning curve. New in that space for me, and so it's a lot. But
well, even if you don't have a business, your relationship is your business, and you have to communicate with that, like regardless of what it is.
Yeah, you said something about the triple C's. In the military, we have a thing called an AAR. It's an after action review, right?
Yeah.
And we kind of do that in our own lives. It's like we've adopted some business tactics, if you will, or military tactics, and we have implemented them even into our relationship. And so we don't formalize it like we're going to sit down and have an after action review, but in the military, you do an exercise, you do a training, you do a mission, you do what have you. And then after the fact, you get together and you do an after action review. And typically what that consists of is you have the group put out 3 sustains and 3 improves, right? Yeah. 3 things we did good and we want to continue to do well, and 3 things that we didn't do well and we want to improve on. And so during those staff meetings, right, or what have you, we would find that we do a lot of that. Yeah. And that's both business and relationship.
Yeah.
What are things that you and I in our relationship are doing really well, whether that's honoring each other or serving each other or not sometimes, because we both go into phases where we're not doing a really
just
good
almost
job.
In passing and just.
But being open to communicating that and understanding what each other needs and just constantly reflecting on it, and a conscious and selfless effort to improve it has been just instrumental.
I think that's awesome, though, that you all have a quote unquote staff meeting, man. I mean, that's like great advice to anybody out there. You think about how much time you spend on your phone, how much time you spend on TV or doing dishes or anything that, diverts you away from your relationship, to take the time, whether it be wake up early or stay up late at night, however, connect with your spouse during the day and communicate everything you just said is huge.
And if there's any other business owners that, listen to this, I would challenge them to kind of start to look at how they run their business and think about things that they can adopt, for their family. I mean, again, being as busy as we are, we have an app that we use called Cozy, and it has everything on it. And then we use another software called HubSpot for task management. And because of the broadness of both our life and our business and the chaos that is, right, we kind of approach it in like a project management angle, if you will, and we narrow the focus every day so that during that staff meeting and when we step out of those conversations, we know what's priority and where our attention is focused today. Yeah. And knowing that as long as we hit those metrics, then we're building, and sort of wrangling the more broad scope with the business. We've got deadlines and stuff constantly for clients or what have you. And so when you look at all of it, it becomes very overwhelming. But when you're able to have that organization and that communication, you can narrow the focus to just take care of the things that matter today.
Yes.
And also build in that time for the unknowns and the family time and the children and homework and chores and things. Again, we run to the extent where we will look at certain things in our life and make the conscious effort to pay for certain things to be done that some people might not would, but because that gives us 2 extra hours to work on a project.
Yeah, that's true.
And that money, right,
more than pays the return.
It's like a cost of goods sold, basically, right?
Yeah, your return on investment.
Return on investment is leaps and bounds above something as simple as like mowing the yard or doing the landscaping or whatever.
Exactly.
So we really do run our life like a business, and for us, not for everybody, I'm sure, but it's been a huge improvement and a huge blessing. Something we didn't do during the K2 days. Yeah. So again, going back full circle is like that.
Lessons learned.
It's just everything's prepared.
Yeah, right? Exactly. Now, don't tell me you don't throw on the white New Balances with the knee-high socks and the
And mow
jorts
the
and go
yard.
out there and mow out.
For 3 years, I've been saying, and if Maverick Martin ever listens to this, I've been saying for 3 years that I'm going to mow my own yard. But one, he does such a good job. And two,
He does such a good job.
he does such a good job. So I haven't gotten to that point. And I will tell myself next year that this year I'm going to mow it myself, and then I won't.
No, that's huge though, because that's one. I'm a big DIYer. I'm a big.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say I'm a penny pincher, but if
Yeah.
I can do a job like
I'm gonna do it myself.
building whatever
Right.
and save the money, I'm gonna do it versus paying somebody to have it done.
100%.
And Allie is your mindset
Yeah.
of no, I need you to take care of this project, which will bring a bigger return on investment versus
Yeah.
the money that we're going to save on this. And
Yeah.
it's so hard for, I guess, blue collar, hands on, whatever you want to call me. Like that's what, that's where I try to focus on and, I need to broaden. So that's, one thing I can honestly say, like we started taking on, started taking on the task of cleaning the house instead of paying somebody to come in and clean the house. Like, but now as I'm doing it, I'm like, dude, I could, like you said, I could take this hour.
I could be editing videos.
Yeah,
Or I could be.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a trade-off. And, and again, like anything, those things ebb and flow. And I think it's just an extremely rewarding, like, responsibility.
Yeah.
And at this point, I think even like with the Hilco stuff, it's like any extra income is fantastic.
Yeah.
But we really just get a lot of enjoyment on helping our clients, and we're offering a service in this area that is, I think we're one of the very few, I guess formalized businesses, if you will, that do what we do in this area. And I'm sure there's other individuals that do it and do it much better than we do. But we don't focus all that much on like the monetary side of it anymore.
Yeah.
It's just the giving back almost, or helping other business owners, or again, working with foundations. And some of the most rewarding things we do is some of those calls that we've had with you. And we talked about just the other day, like the growth of KLF just over the past, year or more, even just as the brand, but the ideas that we're able to bounce off of each other. And then as of recently, to start to see some of those ideas finally, Allie, come to life.
Yeah, exactly.
Is just like that's the upper echelon of rewards,
And like you said, we're seeing the fruit of that because, Hilco, we contacted Matt and Kaylee about doing our website, revamping it and doing everything. And we were expecting to spend thousands of dollars to get that done. And we knew that it needed done again for return on investment.
Yeah.
And, out of the gracious of your hearts and everything, you ended up making that donation to the foundation. And, since then we've got, I can't even count how many times people have, how great our website looks and how everything is, flows great and does everything. So, yeah, I mean, your all's talents is out of this world whenever it comes to that. So whenever you say there's individuals out there that do it a lot better than you, I don't know them.
Well,
and
thank you. We appreciate that. And yeah, that's what I'm, it's a prime example of it's just so much enjoyment, and getting to see you all grow. And we get that enjoyment out of every business, even the paid customers that we've helped. We've helped people take ideas and turn them into, money generating side hustles or full on businesses. We've had clients in the past that have started the same as we did and had an idea and got it off the ground, and then they've ended up leaving their day jobs and they do that full time now. So it's like to be able to help someone achieve a dream or find financial freedom or whatever the goal might be is just it's kind of a high in and of itself.
Oh, I agree.
And even when the times where we get super stressed and we say, we're not going to do this much longer or whatever it may be, there's something always happens, and we're like, it's just such a reward that that we really have a hard time not being semi-addicted to the success that comes from that. So success for us nowadays is much different. We don't, there was a time I went through where money felt like success. And don't get me wrong, in this life that we live in now, money is always an aspect of it, but
And you need it.
and we need it.
Yeah.
But we truly have reached a place, thankfully, and God sent that the money, any money that comes from any of it is nice, but it's not why we do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really enjoyable place to be, and that's even with our own careers at times. We really enjoy what we do, and God gave us these opportunities, and we're just extremely thankful for them.
Well, and if you get to that point, you always hear the saying, if you do what you love, then you'll never work another day in your life.
Yeah.
And, the money will come as long as you're just doing what you love.
Yeah.
And, that's true to a certain extent.
Yeah. It's definitely much easier. And going back to this idea or word of the grind, is like I said earlier, like with the cooks, we talk to them all the time, and they own their own business, Cook Trucking. And it's just so nice to surround yourself at times with folks that get it. And the grind is not easy, and some days you don't want to do it. And some days you couldn't be more thankful for it.
Yeah,
it's like every time you start to be like, I think I'm going to hang it up. There's something that happens and you're like, I can't hang this up.
Yeah.
This is what I love, right? So
Yeah.
like you said, yes, I agree with that saying. It certainly feels like work some days, but the reward is so worth it. And so again, for anybody listening who has an idea, this is not an endorsement on Hillco, do it for free, but talk to me, holler at us, message us on Facebook, whatever it might be. We work with a lot of people that we never see a dime from. We don't expect a dime from, or we'll get them to a certain point where then they do need our services, and then they become a client, a paid client. But in our business model, you have to have an idea and you have to have a desire, and then you have to flip the switch to act on it, and then step out in faith and actually start the business, or we don't have clients.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we work for free with those individuals in hopes that when the time comes, they'll remember us and they'll circle back around. And we have that happen often.
Exactly.
But where we're passionate about is helping people take those ideas and turn them into, reality and take them as far as they want to go.
So I've still got a couple more questions, but
up?
while you hit that, go ahead and tell our listeners if they want to connect with you, they want to research the brand, they want to contact you, where can they go to do that?
Yeah, they can go online, hillcoandbrand.com.
Okay.
That's my personal portfolio. The crazy thing, we joke about this all the time, is that we came back, we said we never going to do this again, and here we are doing it. But like most business owners, especially in this world, we have zero time to focus on our own brand or our own website or what have you. So if you go there and you don't see something that you like, message us, because we have a ton of portfolio items that are not on our website that are big projects that we share with people via email or what have you. But we've done a little bit of everything, from government work to mom and pop bakeries to nonprofits.
You want to see a result of one of their offerings, KennedyLad.org. Shameless plug there.
We've done work with the county. We've done work with Kingston. We've done work with Harriman. And like I said, we've probably got a project in their wheelhouse.
Similar
it just
to
may
what?
not be on there yet. Or of course you can look me or my wife, Kaylee Hill, Matthew Hill, up on Facebook. Send us a message and we get the ball rolling a lot with that. Every time we post a website or a project on Facebook, it seems like at least one comes in the same day, an interest of some sort. And so we get a lot of business from Facebook. I've had people make comments before about bragging on Facebook. It's like, that's marketing.
Exactly.
If you own a business and you're not bragging on Facebook, you're not doing something right.
Exactly.
Right? Brag about your business. That's how you get new business.
Those people must still contact the radio station.
Yeah, they're still calling the radio station.
So one of the questions that I wanted to ask was, where you've been, you've found, your outlets, I guess, with working, substance, whatever it may be. But now coming back around full circle to where we are, like you've got a full-time position. Your wife's got a full-time position. Your kids go to school. You and your wife own Hillco and Brand on the side. How do you juggle all of that while still being a present father, while still being a present husband?
Yeah. Again, it goes back to the communication, the organization. if you go back to some of those earlier conversations we've had today about my anxiety and things like that, and understanding that it's the control part of it, we stay uber organized. I mean, again, if we had a way to screen share, I'd show you my cozy calendar, because it literally has days where it's like change the air filters. They're reoccurring. It happens every month.
Do you recommend scheduling that time on there, like me and my wife an hour here?
Yes.
Or my kids' time
100%.
here, Okay.
100%. We'll put everything. I mean, Kaylee just a day or two ago, she bought tickets to see Moana 2, right? And that's on our calendar. So we know that day, right? Things that are in HubSpot, this, that, and the other. But when this time comes around, 6, whatever time it is,
Yep, shut down.
Everything's done for that block of time.
Yeah.
And again, some people that may be listening are like, that's insane. Again, if you're in our boat and a business owner and super busy or what have you, I think it's a viable option. But even if you're not, I think it's a viable option, because it does help you recenter and prioritize family time or communication. Man, I've had dinner dates with my wife are on her calendar. I've had, field trips. I cannot stress you enough. Everything is in there, from reminders to actual, blocked out time. We know every dollar that comes in. We know when every client is billed. We have monthly retainers that automatically pull this, that, and the other. Every single bit of that is on there, so that we can double check and we can just make sure that at no point there's something falling through the cracks. Yeah. And then typically what we do is, if it's a quick fix that comes in during the day, it's 15 minutes, we knock it out. Yeah. Right. If it's anything bigger, then we've gotten so good at glancing at the calendar and then slotting it in appropriately. Yeah. And that way, like I said earlier, we can stay extremely narrow on our day to day and know that, like, if we just focus on today and knock these things out, and sometimes we got to roll stuff. Mm-hmm. Then we're keeping pace. And so, that's family time. Churches, I mean, Wednesday night church, it's literally on Cozy. And Cozy's the application that we use. We have the free, or we have the paid version. We started with the free one, and I think you couldn't do reoccurrings or something, and so we ended up getting the paid one. We've had it now for probably 3 years, and we pay for it. It's on our Cozy calendar when it renews. But it's everything. And then we use HubSpot for task management. Now, HubSpot is notes. It's a CRM, a customer response management tool. I'm sure if you're in the business world, you're likely have heard of it. It's also a marketing suite. It's a whole suite of services, but the one that we use specifically is for like note taking and then task management. Okay. And so we put all of our tasks in there. You can set due dates. You can set reminders. And then we log notes. We ebb and flow on how well we do that. But when you're in an environment where, say, like for instance, yesterday Kaylee was off. So when she's off, she can, it's legally, but she's not working her paid job. Yeah. So she's able to work some Hilco stuff. Yeah. And so she, we assign things in HubSpot or what have you. But as she's doing stuff and working with clients, she logs a note on what she's doing. She may log an email interaction, a phone call, a text message, or what have you, so that, say, Thursday I'm off.
You take a look at it.
She's back to working. Yeah. I can go the entire day picking right up where she left off without ever even having to call.
You're not messaging saying, "Hey, what's up with this? What's up?" And bothering her throughout her normal day.
So
and vice versa.
That's been a huge. Those two applications basically run our life. So,
and that's Cozy. How do you spell Cozy?
Cozy is COZI.
COZI. So before we bring this thing home, one more question that I'd like to ask, and I try to ask everybody that's on the show. You take your car into maintenance to check up the engine, get your oil changed, make sure all that's taken care of. So let's put that into your marriage and parenting perspective. What is one or two things that you do to check up or maintenance your marriage and, being a father that that to keep the engine running and running smooth and well?
Yeah. Again, it's kind of, I don't think we have to be as deliberate necessarily in reflecting on that aspect, but because of the organization and kind of the daily way in which we run our lives and how we're sort of forced into it. When you plan and you are so, as structured as we are, it really exposes vulnerabilities, if you will. Yeah. And you kind of naturally catch them before they become a problem. I mean, we can look at a calendar and look at a week and go, that ain't going to work. Yeah. There's zero time for the kids, or there's zero time for you and I. We don't get away a lot, just her and I. It's something that we we want to start doing more of.
Yeah.
Every now and then we'll take a weekend trip or even just a date night, and it's so rewarding. It is something every time we do it, we're like, we got to do more of this.
Yeah, it's needed.
It's so needed.
Yeah.
We do so much together though, both the obvious parenting, but business and stuff like that. And especially at a time where we were both, remote, even though I was working my day job full time, she's there.
Yeah. It was together.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
So every time I get off a call, which is constantly, and I get up and go get a drink or refill my coffee, I see her, I get to hug her, I get to talk to her for a few minutes, and then back to work. And so
most people would hate that.
Some people would hate that, and there's times I'm sure where we hated it, but we were spoiled in that aspect because, and we found that now that we've gone back to work, when we both did go back on site, this was the first time I'd really gone back on site full time since pre-COVID.
Yeah,
it was an adjustment, and it was something that we knew it would be different, but we didn't quite know, I guess, how spoiled or how used to the amount of time that we actually got to spend together, and maybe even as opposed or as it relates to other couples. So we started realizing, like, hey, when you work 9 to 5 or 8 to 4, whatever, and then you come home and you have those activities with the kids, or you have whatever, in this case, business stuff and this and the other, like, we're laying down at 10, 11 o'clock, and we have really barely spoken.
Yeah.
So I think it's become even more crucial now to, again, just schedule time together. And, last Saturday was a perfect example. If you look on our Cozy, because of how we do things, I bet if you go through the rest of this year, I bet if you go all the way 12 months, you'd be hard pressed to find 5 days that don't have something on them.
Yeah.
And this past Saturday, we didn't have anything. The whole day was empty.
Wow.
So we ended up working the entire day to get caught up on a bunch of things. But as we reflect, it's like we have to, make that time about us or about the kids or what have you.
I completely understand that, man. And that was, I said I was going to only ask one more question, but like something that Allie and I struggle with terribly is when we do have a date night, when we do have the time alone. Yeah. We don't talk about our relationship. We talk about the foundation, how we, basically, quote unquote, the business, how we can grow it, how we can finally get to that cure that we're shooting every day for. Like, it's so hard, and I don't know if y'all are able to do it, but man, I find it so hard to turn it off. You know what I mean? It's
incredibly hard. You have to almost schedule that. You have to almost force yourself to do it. When we get I will say this, one of the things, in the past, we've gone on at least 2, if not more, week-long vacations. And for us, we truly do turn it off then. Yeah. In fact, we notify customers and clients ahead of time. Obviously, work knows. And there's been times recently where we've not even brought a computer.
Wow.
And
that's so hard with what we do. I mean, you all do digital, right, for the most part.
Well, and it's so hard too, and it's so hard for any business owner. But in our business, some of what we do is other people's well-being.
Yeah.
And so, like, for instance, if we have a client who's 100% online retail, and that's their primary source of income, and we go away or we're doing something and their website goes down.
Yeah.
For some unknown reason, their literal well-being is now stopped in its tracks.
Yeah.
And we've had instances like that, especially back when I was in the military, and that really was a difficult situation. But the time away, we really try to make it time away. And so when we do schedule those times, it's like we're not thinking about it. But when it comes back to, like you said, with you, when we're just sitting there alone, it's gotten, I think, better. There was definitely a time where we really had a hard time turning it off. K2 days, obviously, never got turned off. So again, that was a learning experience. But I think ultimately, again, at the end of the day, you have to force yourself to just be present. And when you go back, when you said like the checks and stuff, what kind of oil changes and things like that do you do? I have recently began to ask Kaylee just the simple, are you happy?
Yeah.
Are you content? And if not, what can I do? And so me being naturally a selfish person, I've had to really teach myself and force myself to think about her and what she needs, because I'm providing, I'm grinding, I'm dadding, I'm husbanding, what else do you want from me?
Yeah, exactly.
But oftentimes it's a lot more.
Yeah.
Right. And just because I think I'm doing a really good job at those things doesn't necessarily mean that.
Yeah. You're blind to what she needs.
And again, being a selfish person by nature, it's been kind of an eye opener. Now, she always says that she's happy and that she's content and all the things, but
no, what do you really mean? No, I'm just
right. But she would and has at times said what she needs that I'm not giving her. You know? And maybe that's just something as simple as like being so laser focused most days and driven. Like we've had this conversation lately of like gentleness. Like sometimes she just wants me to just be more gentle with her, whether it's with my words or, the way in which I approach her about business stuff, because that's another thing. When you do business with your wife, when it comes crunch time, sometimes you fall back on, especially like with you being a firefighter and me being ex-military and what have you. It's like, we don't have time for feelings. It's just, this has to get done. And so then your tone changes and the chemistry gets off.
Yep.
And it becomes hard to just turn off business and personal and what have you. And so I've just been trying to be a lot more cognizant lately of like being milder and gentler and like, what do you need from me? And am I meeting your needs? Right.
I had to check myself the other day because I don't remember exactly what it was, but like Allie started getting emotional on me, and I was like, this is not the time.
We don't have time for
to
emotions.
get, exactly. We do not have time to sit here and cry. It is go time. Let's go. And I had to go back and apologize for that later. But, literally, like you said, our mentality is we'll cry later.
Yeah.
Let's get it done.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
100%.
And
I found myself in that exact situation. Kaylee doesn't cry. It takes a lot to get her upset.
That's the same way with Allie. Yeah.
In those moments sometimes where I'll see her start to tear up, I'm just like, hey, what a dirtbag.
Yeah. Which makes it worse because.
Which makes it worse.
Yeah, it takes so much.
What a dirtbag, meaning I'm inward reflecting, not her.
Yeah,
right. But it's just like, what have I done to get here? And so again, all of that kind of is spoiled up into an oil check or an oil change, like you said. Just stop long enough to say, are your needs met?
Yeah.
And I know maybe that goes against what some people think, or maybe that's us as men being a little more submissive, but it's not that. In fact, I think it's the complete opposite.
Oh, I
it's
agree.
Like when we do best, and Kaylee lets me lead, like she puts blindfolds on,
Yeah.
Which is amazing. And I know a lot of people at times go through periods of their relationship where they struggle with that power dynamic. But when she's in her feminine and allows me to be, in my masculine leading kind of personality, like we thrive. And at times around business and things like that, we'll find that balance begins to get off. Right. Yeah. And this is not like you're submitting to me type thing.
Exactly.
It's just, I have so much in her that I need.
Yeah.
As a man, right?
Yeah.
From the empowerment that she gives me and the drive that she gives me to want to go and do more and be more and all those things. When that power dynamic is off, it definitely throws off everything.
Oh yeah.
So again, going back to the oil changes and things, as I kind of just think through all this, I maybe didn't even realize until you asked me this, that all of the things that we do, and we, again, goes back to communication. We just sat down and we're like, hey, this is off. And,
yeah, exactly.
But again, for her to be in her feminine,
yep,
I have to understand where I'm lacking.
Yeah.
And so that
100% goes back to communication.
Yeah. If she's not telling me,
yeah,
us as men, we're like, I'm crushing.
Everything's good.
I'm crushing this. Right? Like, no, you're not. No, you're not. And again, being selfish and even arrogant at times.
Yeah.
Okay. I am crushing this. You should. But it's not the case.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
There's always so much more that you can do and so much more that she needs. But if you're not communicating about it, you're headed towards disaster personally. Yeah. And I think for a lot of people, And I've had some of these conversations with my guy friends. It's like, hey, I don't talk enough, man.
Yeah.
And then when you do, it's like, are you really talking?
Yeah.
And or are you really listening? That's a big one for me. We'll have a conversation sometimes. We'll have to have it 10 times because the first 9 I was not actually listening.
ADD kicking
right.
in.
Yeah, I'm not going to say I'm doing it to check a box, but it's like I know I should be doing this. I should be having these conversations. But then I'm not actioning anything that I'm actually taking away from. And so again, it goes back. Recently, I've really tried to just be more present and adamant about trying to understand what she needs.
Yeah.
And I don't even want to say understand because sometimes I don't.
Yeah.
And I don't have to. It's not my place to necessarily understand why she needs what she needs. But if she's willing to tell me, then I have a responsibility to
do it.
To do it.
Yeah.
And marriage is hard. But I love it because it, as hard as it is, and we just had this conversation over the weekend, I don't know where I would be had I not ended up with Kaylee.
Yeah.
And she's extremely mild-mannered, and like I said, if anybody's listening that knows her, she's a special breed, but she just helps me like ground myself.
Yeah.
And she's so supportive. Like I said, she lets me she puts on blindfolds and is like, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever you think, you know?
Yeah. And that's huge too. Like I know this is a dad show. This is, men, I hope are listening to this and getting something out of it. But if there's any women out there, like, I know the whole movement of, women empowerment and all that. And I get it 100%, but just like Matt said, being supportive of your husband and not degrading and, anything of that nature means the world to us men. Whenever you are supportive and lifting us up and, showing that confidence in us. Now, that comes with territory as well. Like if you don't show it and you're not that man and you're. Yeah,
don't give it if it's not deserved.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%.
I want to be called out when I'm not deserving.
Yeah,
of it.
exactly.
And recently we've gotten to that place, I feel like, where she's not afraid necessarily to check me too and be like, I'm not going to give you that.
Yeah.
You're not right now. You're not deserving of that.
Exactly.
I mean, she's not going to necessarily come out and say it like that, but yeah, 100%. And like, it's not to, again, sound demasculated or whatever, I guess the term, but like as you grow up, if you were lucky and blessed enough to grow up with a very strong mother figure in your life as a male, then you know that it is extremely rewarding. And same thing with your father figure, right? But just like when your mom's proud of you, or, I feel like as men, again, having grown up with an unbelievable mother, that my mom empowered me so much growing up. And so, to your point, when your wife is exhibiting those characteristics, it is so empowering. And
exactly.
For us, it really, at least for me, and I think this is the case for a lot of guys, it really does make you want to be better. It makes you want to change. It makes you want to work harder. It makes you want to do everything, parent better, like whatever it may be. And as hard as marriage is, like when it is good, there's nothing better.
I agree.
And again, we're not perfect, and we go through times where this is tough and not. But we are so much better today than we've ever been, and I guess to really summarize all of it is like you got to put in the work.
Yep.
And when you get to a place where you're no longer willing to put in the work, I think it's a very, very dangerous place to be.
Yeah.
And I think that all starts with just open and honest and accepting communication.
Yes. When you're going into marriage in these days and you're 52% likely to get divorced, yes, you have to work on it. You have to maintenance it. You have to check up on it, or it's going to go. Like you're going to end up in divorce and, lasting, like what me and Tyler was talking about on the last podcast, man, that's a lasting impression whenever your parents get divorced, whether it happens at an early age or late age. It still affects you. It affects the children for the rest of their life.
So I'm glad you bring that up, because when you're younger, for anybody that may be younger and just starting out, Jake Lehman, just kidding, baby Jake. Those early years are, it gets very cliche, but like they are hard.
Yes.
very hard.
Yeah. Why
And-
most marriages end within
Yeah.
the first 5 years.
And it's not until later that you even realize what about it was hard.
Yeah.
But it's everything. I mean, you've left everything that was for 18, 20, however long, and now you're living under the same roof and trying to figure out how to communicate.
Yeah.
It's just extremely difficult, and understanding each other. And then also you change so much, and circumstances change, and kids are introduced. And so, thank God that we fumbled through what we fumbled through before the kids got to an age where they can be too affected.
Yeah.
But I think some of the chaos may have affected Kimber a little bit more than either one of us realized.
Yeah.
And it didn't materialize until she got a little bit older.
Yeah.
Some of that instability and just all over the place. But now we realize more than ever how much of an effect that you have on your kids. Because, again, this is just yesterday. Kaylee picked me up. She picked me up. She came to the dentist because I had some work done on my tooth, and we were standing out by the car, and we were hugging and we were laughing, but we were cracking up about something. And the kids were in the car. And at one point, one of them opened the door and was like, "What are y'all laughing about?" But Kaylee sent me this message because Kimber had her iPad, and she was texting Kaylee while she was in the car. But she didn't have internet service. So when it came through, when she got back home and she got on Wi-Fi, it came through, and it said POV. How she knew that meant point of view is unbeknown to me.
Social
But it
media
was
or YouTube.
two hearts, like smileys, face, a bunch of the peace signs, a couple of the hearts, and then a like perfect, and then 2 tongue emojis. And then she said yay. So it was like the first time we realized like they love when we,
Yes.
They
may say ooh and all that, but
they need to see that.
yes, exactly.
And they want to see that. And it's much earlier that seeing that has a tremendous effect on them.
Yeah.
And so we're much more cognizant now of when we argue or when we're disagreeing.
Yes.
And when we first amped up the business again and we started to get really busy, we had to reestablish the boundaries of, and so we started finding actually that kids were at an age where I think Briggs made a comment one day like, "Why are y'all arguing again?" Or "You're always arguing." And we weren't arguing.
Yeah.
It was just we were in one of those tactical moments where it's like feelings are not here today and we've got deadlines or whatever the pressures were.
Yeah.
And we were talking to each other in a non-gentle way. And so it just like over this past year, we've started to just realize so much of like what affect our relationship has. And everybody knows that.
Exactly.
But you still don't quite.
Got to be cognizant.
They go from young and not aware to not young anymore and aware. And you don't get to pick when that is.
Yeah.
And you don't often see it until sometimes it's too late.
Yeah.
And so now we're kind of, I don't want to say undoing because it wasn't devastating or detrimental to them, but we're very much more aware of just something as simple as like how we're talking to each other.
I agree, because Lincoln and Kennedy both, like you said, me and Allie would just be talking like we're not even remotely arguing. We're just talking, and not even in a hateful way. And they'll pop up and say, "Stop arguing."
Are y'all mad at each other?
Yeah, exactly. Like, no, we're just talking.
Yeah.
And then, no, you're not.
Yeah.
But like you said, and I agree 100% not to do it in front of the kids. Like, even if you are arguing, if you have to let emotions out, be adult and mature enough to say, let's take this in another room, like away from the kids, or we'll hold it till later.
And I'll be honest, we are just now finding that maturity in the way in which we communicate because we've been such communicators.
Yeah.
We've just openly let it fly.
Yeah.
And like they got headphones on, they're in the back of the car. Well, they've deliberately turned it down to listen to what we're saying.
I agree.
And it just is like, here's another level, Now we can't even talk when we want to talk. So we already can't use the bathroom whenever we want to. So
I understand 100%. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk on that you hadn't?
I don't think so, man.
Okay.
It's been good.
Man, I've loved it. I've enjoyed it.
Appreciate it. I was all over, but it's been good. I came into this today, and like anybody, I think a little nervous, but I was excited to do it. I didn't exactly know, how it would go, but I'm thankful that you invited me. And look, again, for anybody that might be listening, like that either knows me or doesn't know me, I'm not perfect by any means, but I love helping people, and I love when people bring me their problems, and I don't have the right answers, but if I have an answer and it helps you, then I'm here for it. So I hope if anybody takes anything away from it, is like, I'm an open book. I love to talk, clearly.
That's the issue with the 2.5 hours or whatever we've been at this. Is we both love to talk.
Yeah. But yeah, Hilco and Brand, if you ever need anything business related, hit us up. If you want to talk personally, if I know you or I don't, it doesn't matter. Just hit me up on Facebook, and I would love to talk to you and help you through, especially around anxiety and depression. It's real, and I get it. And, if I can help one person, it'd be a win.
I agree 100%. That's always been my theory, and even, everything with the foundation. Like, if we can help one person, all the work is more than worth it.
Beyond worth it. Yep.
Please reach out to Matt if you have any issues, any advice with business, with websites, with digital marketing, or you just want to say, hey, man, I love the podcast. I love the shirt that you're wearing, all the above. So, and if you can't reach out to Matt, reach out to me. I promise you I'll get you in touch with him. But we just want to thank y'all for being here. And Matt, I can't leave without saying, man, I love you. I appreciate you being so vulnerable today, and for being here. And man, I really enjoyed it, and just love talking to you, man. Always.
Appreciate it, brother.
So
it's been good.
Guys, as always, we love you, we thank you, and we're proud of you. Y'all have a blessed day. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Dad Show podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Dad Show podcast. Please like, review, and subscribe.